Turn me inside, old gal. You old sock-dologizing old man trap. Time to assassinate the president.
Caused a major upset last weekend when they played teams that were supposed to be much bigger and much more talented than them, and they beat them. The two college teams provided the upset, but here's the other piece. How much were those two teams paid to go play the big dogs that they beat? You heard me. How much were those two teams paid by the big dogs that they ended up beating? That was agreed to get them to come and play with them. You'll be surprised at those numbers. I'm in the hallways. I got 5 tickets to give away.
Oh yes, quite a few of them. Never read it though. Just chucked them in the fire as soon as he made out where they come from. Yes. See, way we can reckon, we got pretty mad at her. She married again his will, Mom. He was always just a busty old coot. And it seemed every year he just got rustier and bustier and cootier every fall. See, it always took him in, Mom. While this year passed, he come down real bad and ate you. He was so far gone, the doctors, they just gave up the duty. Mother, she ran along and fetched the minister. And while she was out, the old squire called me into his room. And I heard his voice ringing loud and clear as a bell. Come in, Mr. Boy. Well, I come in. Sit down. Well, I stopped that. And he took out a piece of paper just like this. He said, "Here's the boy. This paper makes you earn all my property anyway." Well, I reckon I picked up my head about that. Well, by the came, I reckon he had 3 days fight with the devil for that old man's soul. He finally got the upper hand and taken it last. After he went on his way, the old squire came back to him again. He was changed from what he was before. He was as pale as a sheet coat. And I saw his hair flowing out from under his red hat with big old silver light. And from his big blue eyes came a pair of tears rolling down his throat like a pair of ears. And when he spoke, his voice didn't what it was. It was like a fish. Based on all, I feel like sins in the heart and my heart to my own flesh. But I was not all alive. Believe me tonight, says he. Well, I brought up this candle right quick. Took that paper I was telling you all, twisted it up. He took his candle from his bedside. He took the fire to that paper, silent yes. As he watched it burn slowly away, he said, "There's the boy, that just inheritance. I fixed my own wings to wear. My daughter's sweet darling child, Miss Mary.
Georgia Southern, good morning.
And set back on his pillow, so he felt relief. That was it. Old
Is that your cup?
Does she know you're here?
Huh?
Does he know you're here? Is he here? Is he
I
here?
wasn't expecting that.
Is he here?
I don't know. I'm just supposed to be sitting in here for a little bit. Y'all come in and sit down. I can't sit down. Y'all sit down, have a seat, sit down and enjoy the show.
Hope he's on the phone.
Hi, are you in this class? Oh. Have a seat. Come on, guys, phones up, sit down and enjoy the show.
How are they gonna be allowed?
Come on, girl. Phones up. Well, just find an empty seat somewhere. Find an empty seat somewhere. I don't know. Y'all put your phones up and sit down. Phones up and sit down. What? Just have a seat. Sit down. Right, all up, sit down and enjoy the show. Find an empty seat. Find an empty seat. Just find a seat. If your seat is taken, sit down somewhere else.
No, is that I don't know what I think.
Oh, just pick a seat. Any seat will do today. Sit down, Jason. Travion. No, leave him on.
Interrupted you today, answers to this one. Trivia with Warner today. Marshall went and played Notre Dame, should have lost, but they won. Southern went and played Nebraska, should have lost, but they won. Appalachian State.
Pick a seat and sit down.
I
I don't know, just have a seat. I'm covering for right now.
But what a lot of people don't realize is each of those smaller schools that were supposed to be the underdogs were paid over $1 million. Look it up, each one, over $1 million just to come play the big team, to have the game, and then they get it all from. Which caused something in the back that's quite interesting. Go look up and see what happened.
All right, guys, find a seat, sit down, enjoy the show. Pay attention to the video, please.
Well, ma'am, I reckon that shooting's just like most things in life. You gotta look straight, hold strong, calculate the distance, keep the sun out of your eyes, adjust for the wind, and walk. You're just bound to hit anything in life as well as shooting. Why, you wouldn't happen to meet Miss Gusty here now, would you? This gal and that old woman are trying to get me off track. Well, now, if a rough-spun character like me was to come forward as suitor for your daughter's hand, why, you wouldn't trick me the way some gals mothers would when they found out I weren't heir to all that property.
You're joking, yes. You are joking.
Well, I know. The old squire thought better on it and made his own heir, his own sweet daughter's darling child, his Mary Meredith.
Miss Mary Meredith. How delighted.
Yes, you both look tickled to death. But you don't value fortune, do you, Miss Gussie? You crave affection, you do. Well, I'm just filling over with affection, and I'm ready to just pour all over you like apple sass on rose pork.
You don't recognize you are speaking to my daughter and in my presence.
Why, I am simply offering her my hand and my heart just exactly the way she wants them, with nothing else.
Augusta, it's not the nasty beast. You don't know that that is a polite society
5, 6, 7, Tyrannus! The dark is avenged!
Ain't no way.
He's doing that run outside.
Hey! It's just me, guys. It's just me. I didn't practice this part.
Is there something else I can add?
Okay. As I get back to the room. Welcome to our lesson about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. What you just experienced was maybe a small bit what it would have been like to be at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. on the evening of April 14th, 1865, as John Wilkes Booth snuck into the presidential box, assassinated Abraham Lincoln, and changed the face of American history. Excuse me. Raise your hand if you haven't worked out enough this week. Or month. Come on in. So what I just did was an opening simulation, and I want to be clear, it is over. I am not John Wilkes Booth. I would not shoot the president. But I try to bring alive for you our conversation of the day. And what we're going to do now is talk about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So if I may, have someone pass one to everybody, please.
You need to be close to
A couple of follow-on notes, if you wouldn't mind. A couple of follow-on notes for the day. What I'm driving towards is we're going to watch about a 30-minute show episode at the end of our hour here. We're going to imagine what it might have been like to time travel back to April 14th, 1865. And I'm going to ask you this question. If you could have, would you have saved Abraham Lincoln's life?
Yeah.
If you could have, would you have? Because think of the consequences. What world might you be living in today if you changed history that has already happened? So I'm going to unlimber on my jacket here as we get ready to go. Greetings to our guests. Class, is it like this about 2 or 3 times a week? It's about like this about 2 or 3 times a week. Of course, sometimes we just do flashcards as well. So, Abraham Lincoln, our topic of the week has been the Civil War. Today, our topic is the man himself. We are going to take a bit of a deep dive into this single event. So, as you get your notes passed out, I'm going to move Mr. President off to the side here. Do this in the wintertime, the second semester, don't sweat quite as much. All right, we situated on notes? Cool. We're going to be in attention about 30 minutes, then we're going to watch an episode, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Abraham Lincoln. So, to tell the story, it happened on one night, but the flame got lit years and years before. We've already talked about John Wilkes Booth before. What major event was John Wilkes Booth at that we've already talked about?
That speech.
He was at in Lincoln's second inaugural address, and he really hated what Lincoln had to say there. You know, like, let's come back and be one country. Where was he at a couple years even before that?
Oh, he was at, when John was executed.
John who?
Brown.
What do you want to add to it?
It was in the back.
Yeah, he was a witness to the execution of John Brown, 1859, which many say, rabid abolitionist. Many say that was really one of the events that brought us to the brink of the Civil War. So John Wilkes Booth has been in our story for a while already. But the events of April 14th aren't just a single event. There's several things that walk us to that. I'm going to tell you about a couple more. March 20th, 1865. Tell me what you know about the time that Abraham Lincoln got kidnapped.
What?
Exactly, it didn't happen, right? But it was a plot to kidnap. I love that response. Kidnapped. It never happened, but there was a plot to kidnap the president. John Wilkes Booth and 6 co-conspirators had a fully formed plan to kidnap the president as he was taking his daily carriage ride. Lincoln, to get away from the stresses of the office, the stresses of the war, he'd very often just go on a ride. Anyone just ride roads before? Ride roads, right? Well, on this day, crazy how the small decisions that we make can change things in history. On this day, Lincoln took a different route. I don't know why, but he took a different route. The captors, the kidnappers, were ready to kidnap him on his regular route. He takes a different route. They missed their opportunity. So the kidnapping that never was kind of disbands this group of kidnappers. John Wilkes Booth, though, he's angry. He's just even more angry, more committed to doing harm to President Lincoln. He sees Lincoln as the head of all that he hates. He hates everything in the Union. He is pro-South, pro-secession, pro-slavery. So he sees Lincoln as that figurehead that he wants to take out all things related to the North, related to the Union. So the kidnapping that never was, the co-conspirators disband. But John Wilkes Booth, he's still angry. He's still committed to something. Take it to April 2nd, 1865. This is the day that Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, falls to the Union. So we used the phrase earlier this week, capture the flag. A lot of times in war, if you can capture the capital city, you kind of win the game. This is when the Union finally captured Richmond. John Wilkes Booth, what do you think that did to his attitude? Just seized all the more. Yeah, he was angry all the more. John Wilkes Booth is in Washington, D.C. on this night. And you might think, well, if he's such a Southerner, why is he in Washington, D.C.? It's because of his job. He's an actor. And that's what has him in Washington, D.C. on this night. So being in Washington, D.C., the capital city of the Union, flags are waving, songs are being sung, people are celebrating the fall of Richmond, his capital city. What do you think this says to John Wilkes Booth? Makes him more and more mad. On this night, Lincoln gives an impromptu speech at the White House. It's kind of crazy for us to imagine, like President Biden just opening a window and starting to give a speech. It wouldn't happen today. Okay, security, fences, safety, all that kind of stuff. That wouldn't happen today. But in 1865, Abraham Lincoln, from the second story of the White House, opens up a window. There's about 150 people below him, and he just starts giving a speech. Pretty cool, huh? Like interaction with the president. Well, this speech he gives, which is not really recorded in history, it's only written down in a couple of journals, people's memories of it. He talks about, this is the strongest statement he gives about freedom for African Americans. Now, we know he did the Emancipation Proclamation, right? We know he freed slaves as it related to the military. We know he freed slaves as it relates to the, kind of a military objective. But in this impromptu speech, he speaks of equality and voting rights for African Americans, right? All men created equal. And this makes John Wilkes Booth all the angrier, right? Giving the right to vote to the people that he was so racist against makes him angry. We don't like John Wilkes Booth in this classroom. I didn't dress up like him because we like him. I'm painting the picture of how he got angry enough to assassinate the President of the United States. So this is April 2nd, 1865. What's going to happen just a few days after this? What did I tell you about yesterday?
You'll get shot.
Not quite that.
Oh, yeah, this one.
There we go. So we do a lot of icons in the room, and the white flag of surrender is going to represent Lee surrendering to Grant. This is not the complete end of the war, but effectively it is the end of the Confederacy. When Lee surrenders his 28,000 man army to Grant, it more or less brings it into the fighting of the Civil War. And for John Wilkes Booth, this is just one more thing that's bringing the end to his cause. He feels that now is the time to act to rescue his cause, to rescue the Confederacy. So all these events are leading to the night that we're going to talk about, when Abraham Lincoln has a decision to make. April 14th, 1865, Lee has surrendered for 5 days. Abraham Lincoln gets to do what I need to do. Let me take the breath, right? We talked about the stressors of the war. He's had some personal baggage throughout the war as well. He suffered from what back then they called melancholy. Today we might call depression. Abraham Lincoln's been carrying a lot. April 14th, he's a Friday. It's actually Good Friday leading into the Easter weekend. He and his wife decide to hit the town, right? Lee has surrendered. Victory is on the horizon. Let's go to the theater, right? And now what you guys do sometimes, go to the movie theater. Well, the theater in this case was a stage play. Lincoln had two options. The new hit musical opening across town at Grover's Theater was none other than Aladdin, which you may know from the Disney animated movie, right? Aladdin, stage play, 1865. Aladdin was happening at Grover's Theater. Or he had the option to go to the 1,000th showing of a play called Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. New play or 1,000th showing? It's kind of a debate. Here's why. The 1,000th showing was always kind of like a milestone for a performance. And on the 1,000th showing, this was tradition back in that day, the lead actor or actress would get all the money from the tickets. So he actually kind of wanted to do a favor to his friend, the lead actress. Her name was Miss Laura Keene. He wanted to bring some attention to her show, Our American Cousin. So he chooses to go to Ford's Theater to the play Our American Cousin. And you probably didn't recognize it as you walked in, but what you were watching was a modern performance of Our American Cousin. So Not a super popular play today. I don't expect that you recognized it, but made it as accurate as possible. You were literally watching Our American Cousin as you walked into class today. This is Ford's Theater. Not a whole lot to write home about, okay? It's kind of like a two-story building. Look at the streets of the day. Do they look, what's different than today? Look at all them potholes is a great way to say it. There's not even pavement, maybe some cobblestones in portions. Guys, this is Washington, D.C. This is our capital city. This was the best that we had to offer in terms of infrastructure. So I know that may look a little ramshackle to us today, but this is the scene of Ford's Theater on April 14th, 1865. Here's an interior look at Ford's Theater. Now, this is modern day. Okay, this is renovated. You can see the stage. And then where you see the light and the gold and the American flag kind of bundled up, that's called bunting. Who do you imagine that box is designed for? Presidential box. Could be VIP if the president wasn't in the house, or if the president was coming, he had his own box, presidential box. It's about 12 feet above the stage. So kind of guessing here, Miss Amanda, I'm probably about 12 feet away from you. Can you hear my voice? 12 feet is not that far. So imagine that the stage actors could see the president and could even speak to him. And vice versa. The president could applaud and kind of have a connection with the stage actors. This is the distance we're dealing with. Pretty close. Here's another picture. Again, this is modern, but the seating on the floor, very similar to what would have been at Ford's Theater. Maybe not nice and cushiony, but pretty similar to the way the theater was set up on that night. Again, you can see the stage, and you can see the presidential box as well. So this is the scene of the crime that we're about to be talking about, that we are talking about. Let's talk about key players. Since it's a play, we're going to say it's starring the Lincolns, the Grants, the Rathbones, and John Wilkes Booth. I'm laying a foundation so you understand the video we're going to watch here in just a second. The Lincolns, President, Mr. and Mrs. Mary Todd. Now, we talked a lot about key personalities, and you may understand the Lincoln, you may think you understand the Lincolns pretty well. But the Lincolns, here's something I want to tell you about them. They were not immune to tragedy. As a couple, they experienced the death of 3 children, young. One, age 4 in 1850, so that's even before the war. One, age 11 during the war. So he's carrying the weight of the country, and then as a father, he's also mourning his 11-year-old. So the Lincolns have had a hard go at it. A little bit about Mary Todd. She was considered eccentric, even manic. He was depressive. She was manic. So opposites attract. Married people in the room, anybody? Right? They're kind of opposites in that regard. She was also kind of into some controversial things. She was into seances. She was a bit of a spiritualist. She actually hosted seances in the White House. And that was controversial to a lot of people, kind of bringing some spiritualism into the White House. That's not what our president's supposed to do. So suffice it to say, the Lincolns, they had their own personal story amidst the country's story as well. They probably needed a date night. Would you agree? They probably needed a night out on the town. So the Lincolns are one set of our leading characters. Let's talk about now the Grants. Thanks y'all for coming. We're back anytime. The Grants. General Grant, he has just received the surrender from Lee. Okay, so he's riding high professionally. His wife, Julia, you can imagine they haven't seen each other much throughout the war. They might need date night as well. So the Lincolns invite the Grants. Hey, let's have a double date. Lincolns and Grants. Well, Mr. Grant, or I should say General Grant, is instructed by his wife to decline the invitation. Why in the world would you decline an invitation from the President of the United States? What are some guesses you have?
Because maybe he knew.
A lot of times people do kind of jump to that. Josiah said maybe he knew, maybe he's a part of the conspiracy. That's flexible thinking. I like that. That's not the case. I don't want to wrap Grant into a conspiracy or anything like that. But good thinking. What's another reason you might decline? Think about it. This is his boss. This is the president. What would it take for you to decline an invitation from the President of the United States? Family. Ooh, gonna go visit family? The Grants are gonna go visit family? That's a great thought.
Or someone has died.
Okay, or just a family event. Anthony, you're on the right track. That's what the Grants say they're gonna go do. They say, Mr. President, thank you for the invitation, but we're gonna go visit our children. You know what the real reason was? You ready for it? The women didn't like each other. Mrs. Lincoln and Mrs. Grant didn't like each other. So Mrs. Grant declined the invitation because she didn't want to hang out with Mary Todd all night. That's the real reason. Now, they do go visit their children, but history shows us that this was part of the reason. So the Grants declined the invitation. The Lincolns invite another couple that they're kind of friends with. They've been mentoring. This is Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancee, Clara Harris. Clara's father is a congressman, so she's kind of involved in the government through her dad. He's a major, he saw some combat in the war. So what you have is the Lincolns and this couple, Rathbone and Harris, going to the theater. As they go to the theater, they actually arrive late, and that's part of the story as well. They arrive late. The show stops for the president to enter. Anytime the president enters the building, they actually play this song called Hail to the Chief. So the show stops when the president enters. They go to the presidential box. The show continues on. So set it up. We got a double date going on. The Lincolns and then Rathbone and Harris, this engaged couple. They're going to the theater. Well, let's talk about this leading character, John Wilkes Booth. Ladies, opinion. How's he look? Easy on the eyes? Dreamy Miss Williams? The mustache for you?
Not feeling it.
No matter what you think today in 2020, first of all, it was like, yeah, we're good looking. This was a dreamy man in 1865. All right, this was a good-looking fella in 1865. A little bit more about John Wilkes Booth. He was an actor. Okay, he was a stage actor. No film in this day, but he was a well-known stage actor. So, you got your leading figures today: Chris Hemsworth, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Tom Hanks. I know he's a little older. He's an actor just like them, but on stage, not in the films. Thing about John Wilkes Booth, obviously the country is divided. He's a Southern sympathizer. He's born in Maryland, a border state, but his heart was with the Deep South. He was anti-North, pro-secession, pro-slavery. I've read some of his personal writings, his personal journals. He was definitely racist to his core. He was anti the African-American race. Bad guy. Okay, bad guy. We're not elevating him as a hero. I'm pointing out what a loser he is. But so you might say, why is he in the North? Because of his job. The work that he could find was in stage houses in the North. So amidst his personal feelings, he has to work in this northern city, literally the capital, in order to make money. Something more about him, he wasn't just an actor of himself. He's from a famous acting family. There are actually 3 brothers. They were all famous. Can you think of a modern day acting family? Like, who comes to mind? Siblings, more than one people from the same family. What you got? The Olsen twins? That's a throwback. I like that. What you got? Will Smith and his family. Yeah, Jada and his kids as well. I like that. First box said the Hemsworth brothers. We're thinking that. How about
murderers?
What you got?
I thought those were murderers.
The Hemsworth brothers.
No.
Chris and Liam Hemsworth brothers. How about this one? Now, kind of reaching for my own age here when I say this. Does anybody know Mark Wahlberg? Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Did you know that he has brothers who are also in acting? You might not have because they're less famous. I want you to think about this. John Wilkes Booth was the least famous of his 3 brothers. So these are his brothers, Edwin, Junius, and John. John is on the far left. Okay, he's the youngest, and he's the least famous. Now, think about Hollywood types. Think about actors. They're pretty invested in their ego, aren't they? Pretty invested in their name. So it grated on his soul that he was the least famous of his 3 brothers. You know what he's like? I said to Wahlberg, he's kind of like Donnie Wahlberg. You've heard of Mark. His other brother is Paul. You might not have heard of Donnie. So John Wilkes Booth was basically Donnie Wahlberg, the least famous of his brothers. And because of that, John Wilkes Booth, he wanted to be famous, and he decided, I'm going to do something that is going to make people remember my name forever. And of course, what we're talking about is he decided to assassinate the president sensationally so that he would get famous. All right, let's talk about how it happened. The door, the timing, the gun, the jump, the shout, the escape. This is how it happened. 1, the door. Now, as I walked in today, it's a pretty sturdy door, but I play. And it is basically the biggest laugh line of the whole play. John Wilkes Booth specifically chose to shoot Lincoln right at the laugh line. Why do you think so?
Nobody will hear it.
That's right. The audience is laughing, and it's going to muffle the sound of the gunshot. So the laugh line, which it timed it just perfectly. There's a character in the play who kind of insults her, and he says, "Turn me inside out, will ya, old gal, you sock-dologizing old man trap." And that's actually kind of some made-up slang for you rambunctious woman, you quarrelsome woman. It's an insult. It's a little bit of an insult. Don't go around saying sock-dologizing old man trap. But it always, you can't even say that, right? It always got a laugh from the audience. John Wilkes Booth knew that it would get a laugh from the audience. Boom. And that's exactly when he pulled the trigger. So it was planned down to the second that he was going to pull the trigger as well. Let's talk about the gun. Oh, that's what it looks like right there. Let's talk about the gun. That is the gun. That is a 44 caliber single shot Derringer. Single shot. Think about this. In this day, there were rifles, or rather there were pistols that could carry multiple shots. He could have had a 6-shooter. Why do you think he chose to have a gun that only had one shot in it?
Because he knew he wasn't going to miss.
Because he was going for the head.
He knew he wasn't going to miss.
He knew he wasn't going to miss. Okay, but what if the gun malfunctions? We talked about that before. Any other thoughts? You want to know what his reason was? Those are good thoughts. His reason.
Wait.
Okay.
It was small. So
It was small, and that's a great point. His reason was he wanted to be as theatrical as possible. He wanted to be a one-shot, one-kill assassin. He wanted to go down in history as a one-shot, one-kill, mastermind criminal. So kind of crazy. I've had last year a student called him psycho because of that. Or I think she said freak show. And it came over. You can ask her what she thinks about John Wilkes Booth. This is the actual gun. This is Mr. Swan, 20-year-old Mr. Swanson with Lincoln's gun. And, it is small. That's exactly right. It's pocket size. It's really about this size right here. Okay? It is a small gun. And as such, the Kyrie is not very powerful. We'll talk about that in just a second. Lincoln got shot in the back of the head, but if you wanted to look down the barrel of John Wilkes Booth's gun, that's exactly what it was like. Last moments of Abraham Lincoln, looking down the barrel of the gun. The Kyrie brings up a great point. In as small as it was not very powerful. So Abraham Lincoln was shot from 6 inches away. 6 inches away with a high-powered pistol, goes straight through your brain, and you'd be dead on the spot. This gun really only put the slug a few inches into his skull, and it did not kill him right away. Now, it was a fatal wound. He was going to bleed out and die eventually, but it did not kill him right away. And that actually gave some people the hope that he could be saved, but as it went on and as the medical situation developed, there wasn't any hope he was going to die eventually. So that's a great point about how small and relatively unpowerful it was. Anthony!
Okay, say if he would have got shot today, you think our doctor's going to...
So it's impossible to know for sure, but science does, some people have asked that question before, and it is possible that his life could have been saved with medical science today. We don't know for sure, right? It's impossible to go back and do a full autopsy or anything like that. But
wait, how long ago was it?
1865, about 150 years ago.
For sure.
All right, so let's go. The shot happens. When the shot happens, there's mass confusion. Some people didn't even hear it because of the laughter. Some people thought it was part of the play. And some people did realize that something is going on. So you got chaos going all over the place. John Wilkes Booth, he shoots. And then you got to think, there's a whole other couple in the booth here, right? What if that had been Grant? What if Grant had been in the booth and he had also assassinated Ulysses S. Grant? He really would have lopped the head off of the Union right there, President and General-in-Chief. But it wasn't Grant. It was Major Henry Rathbone. Here's what happens. He draws his knife, just like I did. I don't even know where my knife went. He draws his knife, and he gashes at Rathbone. He hits him right across the forearm. It's kind of just a flesh wound. It doesn't hit an artery or anything like that. But Rathbone does start to bleed a little bit. So John Wilkes Booth, he gashes at Rathbone, and then he jumps from the stage. Kind of like I tried to do, I jumped out the window. He jumps from the stage, and I want you to pay attention to the flag that's bundled up in the picture here. People don't know if he tripped or if his boot got caught, but one way or another, he gets tangled with the bunting, okay, the flag that's right there. And as he jumps to the ground, he lands awkwardly. He lands awkwardly on his left leg. 12 feet, not the biggest jump in the world, but 12 feet and landing awkwardly. What do you think happened to his leg? He broke it. We don't know exactly what his injury was. It was either a big sprain or a hairline fracture, but yes, he injured his leg. And so now he's on the stage and he's hobbled. He can't run away to his getaway horse, but he's hobbled. He's hobbled, he's injured, and he does one more thing. He wants to make sure that people know who he is and what he did. He shows his face, and he had a very famous face, okay? Look, I'm John Wilkes Booth. And he says this, sic semper tyrannis. Now that's Latin, but can you break that apart? Can you see what he might have been saying? Sic semper tyrannis. Anybody? What about that last word? What's that last word look like? Tyranny, tyrant, very good and very close. The phrase is, thus always to tyrants. It actually comes from a famous Shakespeare play, okay, about Julius Caesar. And what he's saying is, tyrants going to get what's coming to them. He says, yeah, I killed this guy because he's a tyrant. Thus always the tyrant. They're going to get what they deserve. So he couldn't just shoot the man and run. He had to make a play out of it. Ever the thespian, he had to make a whole production out of it. So he shouts, Sic Semper Tyrannis. He probably also says one more phrase. Now, eyewitness reports are mixed. He either said, the South is avenged, or the South will be free, right? One of those right there. Either or, he's definitely declaring his Southern pride. Sic Semper Tyrannis, the South is avenged, and then he runs out. Now, to escape Washington, he has a horse waiting for him. He hops on the horse. He's got to get across the bridge. He's got to get across the bridge before the word gets out. Because if the word gets out, what are they going to do? Kill him. Well, they're definitely going to lock down all the bridges. And sure, if they find the man, they're going to arrest him, and maybe he'll be killed on the spot. Who knows? But he's got to get across the river before they shut down the bridges. So what happens is he approaches this bridge to cross the river right at just past 10 p.m. The soldiers were supposed to shut the bridges down at 10 p.m. Nobody in, nobody out after 10 p.m. I mean, we are still at war. When he gets to this bridge, word has not made it to these soldiers. Okay, there's no text messages, there's no Twitter. Like, the word has not made it through the town just yet. And he says to these soldiers, oh, my goodness, buddy, you know what? Oh, it's past 10 o'clock. I'm so sorry I lost track of time. Listen, I'm just trying to get home for the night. Can I get across this bridge? It won't happen again. I promise I'll never do it again. What do you think soldiers said?
Of course, baby girl.
Soldiers let him cross. Now, they didn't know he was the murderer, but they basically did the biggest mistake in the whole process by letting the murderer go across the bridge. Think about all the small decisions we make sometimes, just like Lincoln changing his route. Small decisions we make that change big things. That was a small decision that changed a big thing. So from here, Booth is on the run for the next 12 days, and I'm going to tell you about that in just a second as well. Word now does spread. Lincoln has been shot. First it spreads in the town, then it spreads the whole country. There are wanted posters for these men, and I'll get to that in a second, my bad. Word starts to spread. The president is in the presidential box still. A lot of people, this is something you're going to have to try to understand from the time period, a lot of people thought that theaters were houses of ill repute. Okay, you shouldn't go to a theater, you should go to church. I don't care what you think about theater or church. The attitude at the time was that it's kind of unbecoming of the president to go to the theater, especially on Good Friday. Right? It's Easter weekend. A lot of people in history will say you wouldn't have gotten shot if you'd been at church and not at the theater. Well, bottom line is a lot of people did not want him to pass away in the theater. So his team, his advisors say, let's get the man to the White House. At least he can die in peace at the White House. White House is too far away. If you put him on a horse and a carriage, and Josiah, what did you notice about the roads? Yeah, he would have died from the rattling getting to the White House. So what they decided to do was take him just across the street to what is known as the Peterson boarding house, basically a hotel. They get him across the street to the boarding house, and they flop him down in this bed. And this room was actually occupied by someone else, right? A man who had paid to be there. But they walk in and they flop down the president on this bed. This is not any single moment that happened. Okay, over the next several hours, Lincoln is dying. Now, his wife is overcome with grief. She is manic. She is escorted out of the room because she's so crazed with grief. His cabinet comes in and out. Several generals come in and out. And at 7:22 a.m. the next day, April 15, 1865, that is when the doctor does what doctors, declares the time of death. 7:22 a.m., April 15, 1865, that's when Lincoln dies. His Secretary of War, who is Edwin Stanton, says this: now he belongs to the ages. Kind of solidifying his place in history. This was a great man that we have been in the presence of. Now he belongs to the ages. So look at the picture here. You see the angels. Who is that that's greeting Abraham Lincoln into heaven? George Washington. Yeah. So this is a portrait, of course. Who knows if this is how it happened? But it's almost like saying the father of our country has greeted the great emancipator into heaven, and now they're both in heaven. This is a picture of the actual bed, so you can see how chaotic that room probably was. And you can go and visit the Peterson boarding house to this day. It is set up much like it would have been on that night.
Mr. Swanson?
Yep.
Mr. Swanson?
Yes. Yes. Let's try to figure it out. This is the one and only picture of Abraham Lincoln in death. In fact, his Secretary of the War, the same man that said he belongs to the ages, gave an order that no picture shall be taken of the president in death. He didn't want people to remember him dead, right? He wanted people to remember him only alive as the great leader that he was. Now, I'm going to tell you, do not Google Abraham Lincoln death pictures, because there are some false pictures out there, okay? If you Google it, you're going to see a disturbing image, I'm telling you. There were some hoaxes out there, some hoax pictures. Just because a corpse has a beard doesn't make it Abraham Lincoln. All right, so there are some pictures on the internet that try to say they are Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Taylor and I have had this conversation before. This is the one and only picture that exists of Abraham Lincoln in death. Well, if I said that no photos were supposed to be taken, how did the picture get taken?
Took a picture and ran.
Someone broke the rules. That is true. This photographer, he takes a couple of pictures in secret. Knox, I think you said, what did you say, take them and run?
Yes.
More or less, right? Takes a picture, and it's not a close-up, but you can tell that is the face of Lincoln. You can see that he's being guarded by his army. This man hides these pictures for decades. In fact, he dies, right? He dies without saying that he took these photographs. In the 1950s, his family unearths some of their, family heirlooms, and they find this picture. So this picture was hidden all the way until the 1950s, when it was then brought to light. And I'm kind of glad that this guy broke the rules, because now we have this picture for history. And
That picture's
Edwin Stanton wasn't around to do anything about it anyway. This is 7th grade Mr. Swanson with the bugle that was used at Abraham Lincoln's funeral. So yeah, blonde and that's whatever. Right? Austin, you got 7th grade pictures too. Oh, it's a jacket. That jacket still fits me actually.
It looks like
It shouldn't, but it does. Anyway, Abraham Lincoln's funeral was a national event. He went from Washington. He went on tour of the countryside, basically. Everywhere he went, people came to greet him or to greet his funeral procession. And then he ended up at his home, Springfield, Illinois, which is where he was from. So, I love history. I love artifacts. These are some things that I've seen in my life growing up. But wait, there's more. Let's round it out before we start watching our video. We're doing pretty good on time. Conspirators, the manhunt, the capture, and then I'm sure you guys always like crime and punishment, right? The trials and the executions. So a reward went out for the murderer. But it was really more than just John Wilkes Booth. There were several crimes planned on the same night at the same time. That's called a conspiracy, and these are the conspirators. So a $100,000 reward, that's $1.5 million today. You think people were going to talk for 1.5 mil?
Yes.
Yeah, this was going to get some people motivated to talk. Here are the other conspirators, and you see this part on your page. So I'm going to go over each of these men and women and tell you what their role in the party was. David Harold. David Harold was basically a Booth groupie. He was a fanboy. He loved John Wilkes Booth, the actor, and he was just trying to ride his coattails. He was just trying to hang on to John Wilkes Booth's fame. And the fact that John Wilkes Booth even tolerated him showed how much he needed the affirmation of his followers. David Harold helps Booth escape Washington, D.C. He helps him get across the bridge, and then he's with Booth for the remainder of the 12-day manhunt. So they get pretty close as they are evading the Union patrols for the next 12 days. And I think some of you have read Chasing Lincoln's Killer, maybe in 6th grade. David Harold's a pretty key figure in that because he's with Booth the whole time that he's being chased. Next character in the story is Lewis Powell. Ladies, how's he look?
He look like you.
He looks like me. A lot of times, does he look kind of good? Is it kind of dreamy? He was younger. He was strong. Okay, he was big, strong as an ox, however you want to say that. And a lot of times, he is called the hot convict. All right, don't go googling that. But he is called a good-looking criminal. But he is a criminal.
Hernandez brothers.
He was assigned to murder the Secretary of State, William Seward. So you can see now, this was more than just Lincoln. It wasn't just about killing the president. John Wilkes Booth, he wanted to cut off the head of Union leadership all at the same time. Kill the president. If Grant had been there, which he wasn't, but they could have killed Grant, Lewis Powell is supposed to kill the Secretary of State. Now, he fails. He actually gets into the bedroom of the secretary. Okay, he breaks his way into the house. He gets to the secretary's bedroom, and the Secretary of State, he was actually sick from another reason, so he was resting in his bed. Lewis Powell beats the man to a pulp, and the man doesn't die. So Lewis Powell thinks he's probably accomplished his mission, but Secretary Stewart is strong enough to come back and not die. So could have killed the Secretary of State. This next fellow right here is George Atzerodt. George Atzerodt is a German immigrant. He is a lot of times assessed as maybe a little bit slower on the academic scale, right? He might have had some needs in school, and he was a follower, right? He was a follower of John Wilkes Booth. He was willing to follow anyone who would lead him. So kind of the sad part of his story there that he was a follower. He was assigned to murder the vice president, Andrew Johnson. That's Andrew Johnson right there. Andrew Johnson he didn't have a special house. He didn't have security. He was at a hotel. He was at a hotel called the National. And George Atzerodt was supposed to walk up, knock on his door. The vice president would answer, and he's supposed to shoot him in the face. I know that's hard for us to understand because these days we have locks and security and the Secret Service and all that. But at the time, that's what George Atzerodt was supposed to do, just knock on the door and shoot him in the face. George Atzerodt, he's never really in on the conspiracy. He doesn't really want to kill. He takes his assignment, but he never goes to the hotel. He spends the night drinking, and he just never even goes to the hotel. So his mission is a failure because he never really even tried to accomplish it. That's George Atzerodt, Vice President Johnson. You can see that if this plan worked, we would have lost some key leaders all at the same time, all on the same night. As it is, only Lincoln is the one who's killed. Next up on the conspirators is Mary Surratt. Mary Surratt is controversial in this conversation because she's a she. A lot of people didn't think that women were capable of conspiracy or suited for murder. Now, Mary Surratt does not commit any violent crimes, but she is the owner of a boarding house where all these other men met. Mary Surratt definitely knew what they were planning. She had an understanding of their plans. She also kept weapons and supplies for them. So she is complicit in her knowledge, but a lot of people found it controversial when she went to trial for capital murder. They didn't think that hanging a woman was the right thing to do. And of course, others said, hang them all. If they killed the president, they all deserve to hang. So this is Mary Surratt. Mary Surratt, she's really brought into the plan by her son. So what a bad son, right? Getting his mother convicted of a crime. John Surratt is not present at the time of the shooting. He's in Canada. He does get arrested a few years later, and he's charged with the crime way on down the line. But his mama has to bear the brunt of the crime in the immediate term, like immediately. So that's Mary Surratt. Here's the manhunt. I see some of y'all writing, and I can go back as I need to, but I really want to get us to this video. Here's the manhunt. This is the route that John Wilkes Booth took. You see Washington, D.C. up north, and I'm not going to go through all the stages, but he ends up at a farm in Virginia 12 days later. So remember, broken leg. He's gimping, okay? He's hobbling. He is not mobile. He cannot walk himself where he needs all the way to the south. He doesn't make it as far as he plans to. He makes some navigational errors. They have a really hard time crossing the Potomac River, and his story is going to end 12 days later in Virginia. I'll tell you exactly how in a second. These two books, which are at the front of the room, pretty much tell the story of the manhunt, and I know that this is the Mrs. Ivy level book, Chasing Lincoln's Killer, that she teaches in 6th grade. Samuel Mudd, one more character for you. Samuel Mudd is a doctor. Samuel Mudd was definitely a Confederate sympathizer. Okay, he was in Maryland. Maryland is a border state. He had Confederate sympathies. He also knew John Wilkes Booth. History shows that they talked with each other before the assassination. The question is, did he know about the conspiracy? What happens on the night of the shooting is that John Wilkes Booth goes to his house to get his leg fixed. Now, Dr. Mudd is going to say, I had no idea who was knocking on my door. It's a midnight visitor. He asked for help. I set his leg. I'm a doctor. It's what I do. Realistically, he probably knew it was John Wilkes Booth. Did he know that he had just shot the president? I don't know about that. Okay, history is a little muddled on that. But Samuel Mudd does get involved in the conspiracy because he helped John Wilkes Booth set his leg on that night. Next picture here is pretty cool. This is the actual boot, and this is at a museum in Washington, D.C. This is at Ford's Theater. So this is Booth's boot. That's Mudd's doctor's kit, and I told you he did get arrested, and so those are his handcuffs and his leg shackles from the time that he was arrested. I'll tell you how he fares here in just a second. The capture. Let's see how it all ends for Booth and Harold. Remember, they're on the run for 12 days. They're together the whole time. They end up at this farm in Virginia. And I don't think you have any more notes till after our video, so you can just sit and listen. They end up at this farm in Virginia. It was very normal at the time for some wanderers to be like, excuse us, family, we're wandering and we don't have a place to stay tonight. Can we stay at your farm? And good hospitality would allow them to stay at your farm. His family allows them to stay in the tobacco barn. They don't know that they're involved in the plot. They don't know that this is John Wilkes Booth. He has shaved his mustache at that point. He has changed his appearance. I tend to believe in the reading I've done that this family, the Garretts, did not know who they had on their hands. But as the Union Patrol comes closer to their farm, and the Union Patrol says, hey, have you seen two guys? One of them has a bad leg. This family says, oh, boy, have I ever. They're in my tobacco barn. So the Garrett family leads the Union Patrol right to the tobacco barn. And at first, the Union Patrol says, come out with your hands up. David Harold, John Wilkes Booth, they do not come out at that time. So the Union Patrol adds a little heat to the situation. Literally, it's that fire department. Now this family is like, oh man, my farm's going to get burned down. Well, when the fire gets lit, David Harold said, that's it, I'm out. David Harold comes out, he is arrested. John Wilkes Booth is committed to the act to the very end. He wants to go down in flames, literally. Well, here's what happens. The soldiers were told to not shoot him. They wanted to bring him in alive. They wanted to have a trial. They wanted to show the world that they have captured the man who shot the president. But this guy right here, his name is Corporal Boston Corbett. He has his gun trained on Booth. He claims that Booth pointed a gun at him, and in self-defense, he shoots at Booth. Booth is shot through the throat. He does not die immediately, but after 6 hours of gurgling, his last words are, tell my mother I died for my country. So he does die from the shot 6 hours later, and his dying words are, tell my mother I died for my country. This guy, the soldier, he kind of becomes a local celebrity for a short amount of time. He wasn't supposed to shoot at Booth, but he says he did it in self-defense, and he doesn't really get in trouble for that. How can you be mad at the guy who killed Booth? And like I said, he kind of becomes a national celebrity for a short amount of time. All right, let's hang him. Let's see what happens to the conspirators, the trials, and the execution. Now, there's going to be some photos of real hanging here. I feel that I can show you these pictures because of your maturity, and I also know that my sixth grader has seen these pictures in his Ivy's class, so I feel like, we're kind of at the point in history where I can show you these pictures. That said, if you want to put your head down and not see these pictures, that's fine with me. Here are the conspirators who got tried for the murder of Abraham Lincoln. These four were tried and convicted of murder. Again, controversial is that Mary Surratt was included in the group. The country had no problem hanging the three dudes, right? Hang them high and let them sway. They killed my president. But it was very controversial to put a woman to the gallows. And down to the last second before the boards dropped, a lot of people were shouting for Mrs. Surratt to be let free because she's a woman and she didn't know and she didn't spill blood. Of course, others are saying, hey, she killed my president. Make her sway. There are the four. I love this colorized photo. I think history is amazing that we can colorize photos these days. And there they are hanging. That is the four people who killed the president. And they got their just desserts, I suppose you could say. They were convicted and they were executed all in about a month. This happened on July 7th, 1865. So happens in April, June, July. They were from the crime to the execution was less than 2 months. Rounded out here, in total, 8 people were charged. 4 were executed, the 4 I just showed you. 3 got life sentences, and that includes Dr. Mudd. 1 person got a 6-year sentence. And in my reading, I think this guy kind of got done dirty because all he did was hold the horse. He didn't know that it was John Wilkes Booth's horse. He didn't know what was going on. But because he held the horse, he got a 6-year sentence. But here's how it ends. All of those who were sent to jail were paroled by 1867. Part of Reconstruction, part of bringing our country back together, they were paroled by 1867. So they really only served 2 years of their life sentence. These are the 8 people who were put in, who faced consequences for murdering the president. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're right on time. This TV show called Timeless. I love this TV show. It's not super popular. It's on Hulu, but there's only 2 seasons of it. In Timeless, we follow around this crew called the Time Team, and they jump through history and they interact with historical situations. Part of the story is that there's the good guys and then there's the bad guys. So I'm going to introduce you to our characters. This is Lucy Preston. She's a college professor, and her job is to preserve history. She wants to preserve the good history and the bad history. So she's going to come face to face with Abraham Lincoln And she's going to have to decide if she's going to help him or if she's going to let history play itself out. That's what we're going to see from her here in just a second. This is Garcia Flynn. He's the bad guy. Now, to make the TV show interesting, what he does is jump through history, and he's trying to change history to fit his agenda. His group is called Rittenhouse, and they're kind of like the Illuminati, all right? The TV show builds on that whole premise, but we're going to just focus on the Lincoln side of it tonight. He tries to change history for his agenda, and Lucy and the Time Team, they try to prevent him from changing history. So two other characters you're going to see. Wyatt is the soldier, Rufus is the pilot, and they use their time machine called the lifeboat to jump through history and try to take on Rittenhouse. Let's see what happens when they jump to April 14th, 1865, and we all cross paths together. What could possibly go wrong? Now, here's the big question I want you to chew on. If you could change history, would you? The back of your paper has some reflection questions that you don't have to do until after we watch what we're going to watch here. I know that we're kind of rallying past our bathroom break because I want us to get to everything that we're trying to get to today. It's a worthwhile class if you'll give it your attention, okay? So we're going to watch this episode. I think you'll enjoy it, and then we're going to wrestle with that idea. If I could change history, would I? I'll flip the screen real quick.
No.
Somebody tell me what you thought when I disappeared out of the window. Did you expect that?
Yeah, right.
Do you think I have two cuts on my hand now?
And you love the sword.
All right, fam. I'm asking you to just lean in and watch. Just lean in and watch. Here we go.